The next morning, I overheard Mom and Dad talking as they were getting ready for work. I was getting dressed for school. They should have done more to prepare the kids, Mom said to Dad. The school should have sent home a letter or something. I don't know. Come on, answered Dad. Saying what? What can they possibly say? That there's a homely kid in your class? Come on. It's much more than that. Let's not make a big deal about it, Melissa. You haven't seen him, Jules, Mom said. It's quite severe. Parents should have been told. I should have been told, especially with Julian's anxiety issues. Anxiety issues? I yelled from my room. I ran into their bedroom. You think I have anxiety issues? No, Julian, said Dad. No one's saying that. Mom just said that, I answered, pointing at Mom. I just heard her say anxiety issues. What, so you guys think I have mental problems? No, they both said. Just because I get nightmares? No, they yelled. It's not my fault he goes to my school, I cried. It's not my fault his face freaks me out. Of course it's not, darling, said Mom. No one is saying that. All I meant is that because of your history of nightmares, the school should have alerted me. Then at least I would have known better about the nightmares you're having. I would have known what triggered them. I sat down on the edge of their bed. Dad had the class picture in his hands and had obviously just been looking at it. I hope you're planning on burning that, I said, and I wasn't joking. No, darling, said Mom, sitting on the other side of me. We don't need to burn anything. Look what I've done. She picked up a different photo from the nightstand and handed it to me to look at. At first, I thought it was just another copy of the class picture because it was exactly the same size as the class picture Dad had in his hands, and everything in it was exactly the same. I started to look away in disgust, but Mom pointed to the place on the photo, the place where Augie used to be. He was nowhere in the photo. I couldn't believe it. There was no trace of him. I looked up at Mom, who was beaming. The magic of Photoshop, she said happily, clapping her hands. Now you can look at this picture and not have to have your memory of 5th grade be tarnished, she said. That's so cool, I said. How did you do that? I've gotten pretty good at Photoshop, she answered. Remember last year how I made all the skies blue in the Hawaii pictures? You would have never known it rained every day, answered Dad, shaking his head. Laugh if you want, said Mom, but now when I look at those pictures, I don't have to be reminded of the bad weather that almost ruined our trip. I can remember it for the beautiful vacation that it was, which is exactly how I want you to remember your 5th grade year at Beecher Prep. Okay, Julian? Good memories, not ugly ones. Thanks, Mom, I said, hugging her tightly. I didn't say it, of course, but even though she changed the skies to a light blue on the photos, all I ever really remembered about our Hawaii trip was how cold and wet it was when we were there, despite the magic of Photoshop. Look, I didn't start out being mean. I'm not a mean kid. Sure, sometimes I make jokes, but they're not mean jokes. They're just teasing jokes. People have to lighten up a little. Okay, maybe sometimes my jokes are a little mean, but I only make those jokes behind someone's back. I never say stuff to anyone's face that will actually hurt someone. I'm not a bully like that. I'm not a hater, dudes. Attention, people, stop being so sensitive. Some people totally got the whole Photoshop thing and some didn't. Henry and Miles thought it was so cool and wanted my mom to email their moms the photo. Amos thought it was weird. Charlotte completely disapproved. I don't know what Jack thought because he had gone over to the dark side by now. It's like he totally abandoned his peeps this year and only hangs out with Augie now, which bugged me because that meant I couldn't hang out with him anymore. No way was I going to catch the plague from that freak. That was the name of the game I invented, the plague. It was simple. If you touched Augie and you didn't wash off the contamination, you died. Everyone in the whole grade played, except Jack and Summer. So here's the strange thing. I've known Summer since we were in 3rd grade, and I've never really paid any attention to her. But this year, Henry started liking Savannah, and they were like going out. Now, by going out, I don't mean like high school stuff, which would be kind of gross and barf disgusting. All it means when you're going out is that you hang together and meet each other at the lockers and sometimes go to ice cream shop on Ames 4th Avenue after school. So first, Henry started going out with Savannah. Then Miles started going out with Semina. And I was like, yo, what about me? And then Amos said, I'm going to go ask Summer out. And I was like, no way, I'm asking her out. So that's when I started kind of liking Summer. But it totally bit that Summer, like Jack, was on Team Augie. It meant I couldn't hang out with her at all. I couldn't even say what's up to her because the freak might think I was talking to him or something. So I told Henry to have Savannah invite Summer to the Halloween party at her house. I figured I could hang out with her and maybe even ask her to go out with me. That didn't work though, because she ended up leaving the party early. And ever since then, she's been spending all her time with the freak. Okay, I know it's not nice to call him the freak, but like I said before, people have to start being a little less sensitive around here. It's only a joke, everyone. Don't take me so seriously. I'm not being mean. I'm just being funny. And that's all I was doing, being totally funny the day that Jack Will punched me. I had been totally joking, fooling around. I didn't see it coming at all. The way I remember it, we were just goofing together, and all of a sudden, he whacks me in the mouth for no reason. Boom! And I was like, ow, you crazy jerk-faced. You punched me. You actually punched me. The next thing I know, I'm in Nurse Molly's office holding one of my teeth in my hand, and Mr. Tushman's there. And I hear him on the phone with my mom saying that they're taking me to the hospital. I could hear my mom screaming on the other end of the line. Then Ms. Rubin, the dean, is leading me into the back of an ambulance, and we're on the way to the hospital. Crazy stuff. When we were riding in the ambulance, Ms. Rubin asked me if I knew why Jack hit me. I was like, duh, because he's totally insane. Not that I could talk much because my lips were swollen and there was blood all over my mouth. Ms. Rubin stayed with me at the hospital until Mom showed up. Mom was more than a little hysterical, as you can imagine. She was crying kind of dramatically every time she saw my face. It was, I have to admit, a little embarrassing. Then Dad showed up. Who did this? Was the first thing he said, shouting at Miss Rubin. Jack Willa, answered Miss Rubin calmly. He's with Mr. Tushman now. Jack Will? Cried Mom in shock. We know the Wills. How could that happen? There will be a thorough investigation, answered Miss Rubin. Right now, what's most important is that Julian's going to be fine. Fine, yelled Mom. Look at his face. Do you think that's fine? I don't think that's fine. This is outrageous. What kind of school is this? I thought kids didn't punch each other at school at, like, breach or prep. I thought that's why we pay $40,000 a year so our kids don't get hurt. Mrs. Alban, said Ms. Rubin, I know you're upset. I'm assuming the kid will get expelled, right? Said Dad. Dad, I yelled. We will definitely deal with this matter in an appropriate way, I promise, answered Ms. Rubin, trying to keep her voice calm. And now, if you don't mind, I think I'll leave you guys alone for a bit. The doctor will be back and you can check in with him, but he said that nothing was broken. Julian's fine. He lost the lower first molar, but that was on its way out anyway. He's going to give him some pain medication and you should keep icing it. Let's talk more in the morning. It was only then that I realized that poor Miss Rubin's blouse and skirt were completely covered in my blood. Boy, mouths do bleed a lot. Later that night, when I could finally talk again without it hurting, Mom and Dad wanted to know every detail of what had happened, starting with what Jack and I had been talking about right before he hit me. Jack was upset because he was paired up with the deformed kid, I answered. I told him he could switch partners if he wanted to, and then he punched me. Mom shook her head. That was it for her. She was literally madder than I'd ever seen her before, and I've seen my mom pretty mad before, believe me. This is what happens, Jules, she said to Dad, crossing her arms and nodding quickly. This is what happens when you make little kids deal with issues they're not equipped to deal with. You are just too young to be exposed to this kind of stuff. That Tushman is an idiot. And she said a whole bunch of other things too, but those are kind of too in a pro. You know what I mean, for me to repeat. Dad, I don't want Jack to get expelled from school, I said later on in the night. He was putting more ice on my mouth because of the painkiller they had given me at the hospital was wearing off. That's not up to us, he answered, but I wouldn't trouble myself about it if I were you. Whatever happens, Jack will get what he deserves for this. I have to admit, I started feeling kind of bad for Jack. I mean, sure, he was a total dipstick for punching me. I wanted him to get in trouble, but I really didn't want him to get kicked out of school or anything. But Mom, I could tell, was on one of her missions now, as Dad would say. She gets like that sometimes when she gets so outraged by something that there's no stopping her. She was like that a few years ago when a kid got hit by a car a couple of blocks away from Beecher Prep. She had like 1 million people sign a petition to have a traffic light installed. That was a supermom moment. She was also like that last month when our favorite restaurant changed its menu and they no longer made my favorite dish the way I liked it. That was another supermom moment because she talked to the new owner. They agreed to special order the dish just for me. But Mom also gets like that for not so nice stuff, like when a waiter messes up a food order. That's a not so super mom moment because, well, it can get kind of weird when your mom starts talking to a waiter like he's 5 years old. Awkward. Also, Dad says, you don't want to get a waiter mad at you. They have your food in their hands. Duh. So I wasn't totally clear on how I felt when I realized that my mom was declaring a war on Mr. Tushman, Augie Pullman, and all of Beecher Prep. Was it going to be like a supermom moment or a not-so-supermom moment? Like, would it end up with Augie going to a different school? Yay. Or with Mr. Tushman blowing his nose in my cafeteria food? Ugh. It took about 2 weeks for the swelling to go completely down. Because of that, we ended up not going to Paris over winter break. My mom didn't want our relatives to see me looking like I'd been in a prize fight. She also wouldn't take any pictures of me over the holidays because she said she didn't want to remember me looking like that. For our annual Christmas card, we used one of the rejects from last year's photo shoot. Even though I wasn't having a lot of nightmares anymore, the fact that I had started having nightmares again really worried Mom. I could tell she was totally stressed out about it. Then, the day before our Christmas party, she found out from one of the other moms that Augie had not been through the same kind of mission screening that the rest of us had been. See, every kid who applies to Beecher Prep is supposed to be interviewed and take a test at the school. But some kind of exception had been made for Augie. He didn't come to the school for the interview, and he got to take the admissions test at home. Mom thought that was really unfair. This kid should not have gotten into the school, I heard her telling a group of other moms at the party. Beecher Prep is just not set up to handle situations like this. We are not an inclusion school. We don't have the psychologists needed to deal with how this affects the other kids. Poor Julian had nightmares for a whole month. Ugh, Mom, I hate you telling people about my nightmares. Henry was upset as well, Henry's mom said, and the other moms nodded. They didn't even prepare us beforehand, Mom went on. That's what gets me the most. If they're not going to provide additional psychological support, at least warn the parents ahead of time. Absolutely, said Miles' mom, and the other moms nodded again. Obviously, Jack Will could have used some therapy, Mom said, rolling her eyes. I was surprised they didn't expel him, said Henry's mom. Oh, they would have, answered Mom, but we asked them not to. We've known the Will family since kindergarten. They're good people. We don't blame Jack, really. I think he's just cracked under the pressure of having to be this kid's caretaker. That's what happens when you put little kids into these kinds of situations. I honestly don't know what Tushman was thinking. I'm sorry, I just have to step in here, said another mom. I think it was Charlotte's mom, because she had the same bright blonde hair and big blue eyes. It's not like there's anything wrong with this kid, Melissa. He's a great kid who just happens to look different, but... Oh, I know, Mom answered, and she put her hand over her heart. Oh, Bridget, no one's saying that he's not a great kid. Believe me, I'm sure he is. And I hear the parents are lovely people. That's not the issue. To me, ultimately, the simple fact of the matter is that Tushman didn't follow protocol. He flagrantly disregarded the application process by not having the boy come to Breacher prep for the interview or take the test like every one of our kids did. He broke the rules, and rules are rules. That's it. Mom made a sad face at Bridget. Oh, dear Bridget, I can see you totally disapprove. No, Melissa, not at all, Charlotte's mom said, shaking her head. It's a tough situation all around. Look, the fact is your son got punched in the face. You have every right to feel angry and demand some answers. Thank you, Mom nodded and crossed her arms. I just think the whole thing has been handled terribly, that's all. And I blame Tushman completely. Absolutely, said Henry's mom. He's got to go, agreed Miles' mom. I looked at Mom, surrounded by nodding moms, and I thought, okay, so maybe this is going to turn out to be one of those really super mom moments. Maybe everything she was doing would make it so that Augie ended up going to a different school, and then things could go back to the way they used to be at Beecher Prep. That would be so awesome. But a part of me was thinking, maybe this is going to turn into a not-so-super mom moment. I mean, some of the stuff she was saying sounded kind of, I don't know, kind of harsh, I guess. It's like when she gets mad at a waiter. You end up feeling sorry for the waiter. The thing is, I know she's on this anti-Tushman mission because of me. If I hadn't started getting nightmares again, and if Jack hadn't punched me, none of this would be happening. She wouldn't be making a big deal about Augie or Tushman, and she'd be concentrating all her time and energy on good stuff, like raising money for the school and volunteering at the homeless shelter. Mom does good stuff like that all the time. So, I don't know. On one hand, I'm happy she's trying to help me. On the other hand, I would love for her to stop. The thing that annoyed me the most when we got back from winter break was that Jack had gone back to being friends with Augie again. They had had some kind of fight after Halloween, which is why Jack and I started being bros again. But after winter break was over, they were best buds again. It was so lame. I told everyone we needed to really ice Jack out for his own good. He had to choose once and for all whether he wanted to be on Team Augie or Team Julian and the rest of the world. So we started completely ignoring Jack, not talking to him, not answering his questions. It was like he didn't exist. That'll show him. And that's when I started leaving my little notes. One day, someone had left a post-it notes in one of the benches in the yard, which is what gave me the idea. I wrote this really psycho-killer handwriting. Nobody likes you anymore. I slipped it into the slits in Jack's locker when no one was looking. I watched him out of the corner of my eye when he found it. He turned around and saw Henry opening his locker nearby. Did Julian write this? He asked. But Henry was one of my peeps, you know. He just iced Jack out. Pretended like no one was even talking to him. Jack crumbled the post-it and flicked it into his locker and banged the door shut. After Jack left, I went over to Henry. Holla, I said, giving him the devil's sign, which made Henry laugh. Over the next couple of days, I left a few more notes in Jack's locker, and then I started leaving some in Augie's locker. They were not, I repeat, not a big deal. They were mostly stupid stuff. I didn't think anyone would ever take them seriously. I mean, they were actually kind of funny. Well, kind of. At least some of them were. You stink, big cheese. Freak. Get out of our school, orc. No one but Henry and Miles knew that I was writing these notes, and they were sworn to secrecy. I don't know how the heck Mr. Tushman found out about them. I don't think Jack or Augie would have been dumb enough to rat on me, because they had started leaving me notes in my locker too. I mean, how stupid would you have to be to rat someone out about something you were doing too? So here's what happened. A few days before the 5th grade nature retreat, I was totally looking forward to, Mom got a phone call from Dr. Jansen, the headmaster of Breacher Prep. He said he wanted to discuss something with her and Dad and asked for a meeting. Mom assumed it was probably had something to do with Mr. Tushman, that maybe he was getting fired. So she was actually kind of excited about the meeting. They showed up for the appointment at 10 a.m., and they were waiting in Dr. Jansen's office when all of a sudden they see me walking into the office too. Ms. Rubin had taken me out of class, asked me to follow her, and brought me there. I had no idea what was up. I'd never even been to the headmaster's office before, so when I saw Mom and Dad there, I looked as confused as they looked. "What's going on?" Mom said to Ms. Rubin. Before Ms. Rubin could say anything, Mr. Tishman and Dr. Jensen came into the office. Everyone shook hands, and they were all smiles as they greeted one another. Ms. Rubin said that she had to go back to class, but she would call Mom and Dad later to check in. This surprised Mom. I could tell she started thinking that maybe this wasn't about Mr. Tishman getting fired after all. Then Dr. Jansen asked us to sit on the sofa opposite his desk. Mr. Tishman sat down in the chair next to us, and Dr. Jansen sat behind his desk. "Well, thank you so much for coming in, Melissa and Jules," Dr. Jansen said to my parents. It was strange hearing him call them by their first names. I knew they all knew each other from being on the board, but it sounded weird. "I know how busy you are, and I'm sure you're wondering what this is all about." "Well, yes," said Mom, but her voice drifted off. Dad coughed into his hand. "The reason we asked you here today is because, unfortunately," Dr. Jansen continued, "we have a serious matter on our hands, and we'd like to figure out the best way to resolve it. Julian, do you have any inkling of what I might be talking about?" He looked at me. I opened my eyes wide. "Me?" I snapped my head back and made a face. "No." Dr. Jansen smiled and sighed at me at the same time. He took off his glasses. "You understand," he said, looking at me. "We take bullying very seriously here at Breacher Prep. There's a zero tolerance for any kind of bullying. We feel that every single one of our students deserves the right to learn in a caring and respectful atmosphere." "Excuse me, but can someone tell me what's going on here?" Mom interrupted, looking at Dr. Jansen impatiently. "We obviously know the mission statement at Breacher Prep, Hal. We practically wrote it. Let's cut to the chase. What's going on?" Dr. Jansen looked at Mr. Tishman. "Why don't you explain, Larry?" he said. Mr. Tishman handed an envelope to Mom and Dad. Mom opened it and pulled out the last 3 Post-it notes I had left in Augie's locker. I knew immediately that's what they were because they were actually pink Post-it notes and not yellow ones like all the others had been. So I thought, aha, so it was Augie who told Mr. Tishman about the Post-it notes. What a turd. My mom read through the notes quickly, raised her eyebrows, and passed them to Dad. He read them and looked at me. "You wrote these, Julian?" he said, holding the notes out for me. I swallowed. I looked at him kind of blankly. He handed me the notes, and I just stared at them. Well, I answered, "Yeah, I guess." "But, Dad, they were writing notes too." "Who is writing notes?" asked Dad. "Jack and Augie," I answered. "They were writing notes to me too. But it wasn't just me." "But you started the note writing, didn't you?" asked Mr. Tishman. "Excuse me?" Mom interjected angrily. "Let's not forget that it was Jack Will who punched Julian in the mouth, not the other way around. Obviously, there's going to be residual anger." "How many of these notes did you write, Julian?" Dad interrupted, tapping on the Post-it notes I was holding. "I don't know," I said. It was hard for me to get the words out, like 6 or something, but the other ones weren't this, bad. These notes are the worse than the other ones I wrote. The other ones weren't so. My voice kind of drifted off as I reread what I had written on these notes. "Yo, Darth Hideous, you're so ugly you should wear a mask every day. And I hate you, freak." And the last one, "I bet your mother wishes you'd never been born. You should do everybody a favor and die." Of course, looking at them now, they seemed a lot worse than when I wrote them. But I was mad then, super mad. I had just gotten one of their notes and... "Wait," I said, and I reached into my pocket. I found the last Post-it note that Augie and Jack had left for me in my locker, just yesterday. It was kind of crumpled up now, but I held it out to Mr. Tishman. "Look, they wrote mean stuff too." Mr. Tishman took the Post-it and read it quickly, handed it to my parents. My mom read it, then looked at the floor. My dad read it, shook his head, puzzled. He handed me the Post-it note, and I reread it. "Julian, you're so hot. Summer doesn't like you, but I want to have your baby. Smell my armpits. Love, Beulah." "Who the heck is Beulah?" asked Dad. Never mind, I answered. I can't explain. I handed the Post-it note back to Mr. Tishman, who gave it to Dr. Jensen to read. I noticed he actually tried to hide a smile. Julian, said Mr. Tishman, the 3 notes you wrote don't compare at all to this note in content. I don't think it's for anyone else to judge the semantics of a note, said Mom. It doesn't matter whether you think one note is worse than the other. It's how the person reading the note reads it. The fact is, Julian had a little crush on this summer girl all year long, and it probably hurt his feelings. Mom, I yelled, and I covered my face with my hands. That's so embarrassing. All I'm saying is that the note can be hurtful to a child, whether you see it or not, Mom said to Mr. Tishman. Are you kidding me? Answered Mr. Tishman, shaking his head. He sounded angrier than I had ever heard him before. Are you telling me that you don't find the Post-it notes your son wrote completely horrifying? Because I do. I'm not defending the notes, answered Mom. I'm just reminding you that it was a two-way street. You have to realize that Julian was obviously writing those notes as a reaction to something. Look, said Dr. Jansen, holding his hand out in front of him like a crossing guard, there's no doubt that there's some history here. Those notes hurt my feelings, I said, and I didn't mind that I sounded like I was going to cry. I don't doubt that their notes hurt your feelings, Julian, Dr. Jensen answered, and you were trying to hurt their feelings. That's the problem with stuff like this. Everyone keeps trying to top one another, and then things escalate out of control. Exactly, said Mom, and almost sounded like she screamed it. But the fact is, Dr. Jensen continued, holding up his finger, there is a line, Julian. There is a line, and your notes cross that line. They're completely unacceptable. If Augie had read these notes, how do you think he'd feel? He was looking at me so intensely that I felt like disappearing under the sofa. You mean he hasn't read them? I asked. No, answered Dr. Jensen. Thank goodness someone reported the notes to Mr. Tishman yesterday, and he opened Augie's locker and intercepted them before Augie ever saw them. I nodded and lowered my head. I have to admit, I was glad Augie hadn't read them. I guess I knew what Dr. Jensen meant about crossing the line. But then I thought, so if it wasn't Augie, who ratted me out? Who was it? We were all quiet for a minute or two. It was awkward beyond belief.